Let me ask you something. If building wealth was just about being smart or working hard, then why are so many smart and hardworking people still broke? Why are there people who do everything right on paper, wake up early, hustle, grind, save money, get a job, and yet year after year, nothing really changes? And why is it that some people who didn't come from privilege, who didn't finish school, who didn't have connections, are somehow walking in peace, clarity, and abundance? I used to think it was luck. Then I thought it was timing. But the longer I live, the more I realize it's alignment, and not just alignment with money. Not alignment with trends or hacks or hustle culture. I'm talking about spiritual alignment. That quiet inner discipline that nobody sees but God notices. Because the truth is, wealth doesn't start with money. Wealth starts in the spirit. It starts in your thinking, your character, your integrity, your ability to stay grounded when things go slow, quiet, or wrong. Most people want the result, wealth, freedom, ease, but very few are willing to ask, am I even the kind of person who can carry that kind of life? You see, you can have ambition, you can have talent, you can have a strategy, but if your spirit is undisciplined, if your inner life is weak, everything you build will eventually fall. You'll self-sabotage, you'll chase noise, you'll compromise, you'll cut corners, you'll lose the very peace you thought wealth would bring. So let's flip the question. What if the reason you're stuck isn't because you're lazy, but because your soul is undisciplined? What if your lack of focus, your scattered energy, your inconsistent habits are not time management problems, but spiritual ones? What if the real reason you haven't broken through isn't that you're not manifesting hard enough, but that you're not aligned deep enough? Nobody talks about this because it's not glamorous. It's not the kind of thing that gets clicks or goes viral. But I'll tell you this, the wealthiest, most grounded people I've ever met weren't just successful. They were anchored. They had a center. They had discipline. Not just on the outside, but inside. They didn't just know what to do. They knew who they were. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because if you're building a life, especially in a place where life is hard, unstable, unfair, you can't afford to build on shaky ground. You can't afford to build on emotion. You can't afford to build on hype. You need to build on something that doesn't move when everything else does. And that starts with your spirit. So how does spiritual discipline create real wealth? Let me start with this. Real wealth isn't money first. It's clarity. It's control. It's peace. It's knowing exactly what matters and being able to build it slowly without quitting halfway. I didn't always have that. There was a time I was all over the place, jumping from one thing to another, trying every idea, starting every hustle, burning out and wondering why I couldn't get ahead. I thought I had a strategy problem. Turns out, I had a spiritual discipline problem. The shift happened when I stopped treating success like an emergency and started treating it like an assignment. And that assignment needed structure. It needed patience. It needed me to show up even when I didn't feel anything. Discipline started with my mornings. I began to wake up earlier, not because I wanted to hustle harder, but because I needed time with God before the world could distract me. That space became my anchor. It wasn't about religion, it was about realignment. Because I noticed that the more I started the day connected, grounded, the less I chased things that didn't matter. That alone saved me from wasting energy on ideas that would have led nowhere. Second, I started obeying instead of overthinking. There were things I already knew I should do. Launch the product, talk to the customer, record the content, offer the service. But I kept hesitating, analyzing, delaying. One day during my quiet time, it hit me. You don't need another confirmation. You need obedience. So I did what I could with what I had. No perfection, just obedience. That one habit of obeying what I already knew, that built my momentum. Third, I created boundaries. You cannot be spiritually disciplined and emotionally reckless. I stopped entertaining distractions, people, habits, content, even opportunities that made me feel busy but weren't bearing fruit. I used to think saying yes to everything would help me grow, but saying yes to the wrong things was draining me. When I started protecting my peace and limiting my inputs, my output exploded. That's when the business started growing. Not because I was doing more, but because I was finally doing what mattered. Fourth, I started thinking long-term. Spiritual discipline taught me to stop being reactive. You don't plant today and harvest tomorrow. You build, you grow, you stay. And you trust the process. There were months. Nothing seemed to move. But I kept doing the work, posting, showing up, serving clients, creating value. Eventually, things broke open. Sales came in, clients started referring others, people I never met started messaging me because they saw consistency, and they trusted me because I wasn't just another loud voice. I was steady. Fifth, I started honoring money, not chasing it. Before I used to chase income. Now I manage it with reverence. When you're spiritually disciplined, you don't just get rich. You become a good steward. I budgeted better, I tithed better, I invested in what mattered. I stopped needing to prove anything. I let my money serve my calling, not the other way around. And that's the fruit of spiritual discipline. It doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you effective. It doesn't make you loud, it makes you anchored. It doesn't promise instant success. It gives you enduring progress. Now, you might be asking, how do I even begin? How do I develop spiritual discipline if I've never been consistent in anything? You start small. Wake up 30 minutes earlier and sit in silence. Read one chapter of Proverbs a day. Write down your distractions and cut one of them out. Act on one truth you've been avoiding. Say no to one thing that's been draining you. That's it. Don't start by trying to change your whole life. Start by changing what you obey, because wealth is not the reward of talent. It's the harvest of obedience. And obedience becomes real when your spirit is trained daily, quietly, faithfully. That's how spiritual discipline builds wealth, not overnight, but surely, one decision at a time. You know what I realized the longer I lived in poverty? It wasn't really about money. It looked like it was. I thought it was. But it wasn't, because I've seen people who had very little money, but their spirit was rich. And I've also seen people with a lot of money, but their soul was empty, anxious, and lost. So I started asking deeper questions. And one day it hit me. The reason most people are broke on the outside is because they're already broken on the inside. They are spiritually poor, and their material life is just reflecting it. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about your spirit, your inner world. That invisible realm where belief lives, where your thoughts are shaped, where identity is formed. Hebrews 11 verse 3 says, "By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which are visible." Let that sink in. Everything you see, the house, the car, the clothes, the money, came from something unseen. Everything material was once immaterial. Everything physical was once spiritual. God spoke, and it came to be. That means the real root of wealth is not in the marketplace, it's in the mind and spirit. So when people say, "I'm broke," I ask, where? In your wallet, or in your faith? In your bank account, or in your vision? In your situation, or in your spirit? Because I've learned this the hard way. No amount of strategy can fix a broken spirit. If you feel hopeless, if you see yourself as small, if you think the world is against you, you will keep repeating poverty even if someone hands you an opportunity. You can't hold success with a broken spirit. You'll drop it, sabotage it, blame it, waste it. That's what I did in the beginning. God was opening doors. But my spirit was still limping. I still carried fear. I still carried shame. I still believed I wasn't good enough. And because of that, everything I touched felt heavy. Here's the truth. If your spirit is tired, weak, afraid, confused, your material life will show it. This is why some people never escape poverty. Not because there's no way out, but because there's no strength inside to take the way out. You can give a poor man 1,000,000 pesos, but if his thinking is still poor, if his habits are still broken, if his confidence is still missing, he'll spend it all and go back to zero. Why? Because he's trying to live a rich life from a poor spirit. It doesn't work that way. The invisible always creates the visible. That's not just biblical, that's reality. When the spirit is aligned, when your belief is strong, when your identity is clear, you begin to walk in a different frequency. You begin to expect more, speak with more clarity, move with more boldness. That's when opportunities start coming, not because you manifested them through emotion, but because you finally became someone who could carry them with discipline and wisdom. You became someone who could handle what God wanted to give. That's the problem with poverty. It doesn't just steal your resources, it steals your ability to see beyond your current season. When your spirit is broken, you stop dreaming, you stop planning, you stop believing. You live on defense, you just want to survive. And day by day, you shrink. Until one day, you start thinking, this is just how life is. This is all I'll ever have. I'm not the type of person who succeeds. That's not humility. That's brokenness. And that brokenness in your spirit becomes the blueprint for your reality. So if you're wondering why you're still broke, don't just look at your income, look at your inner life. Ask yourself, what am I carrying inside me? Am I carrying fear or vision? Am I carrying bitterness or wisdom? Am I carrying identity or insecurity? You can't pour out what you don't have. And if you want your life to produce something new, you have to plant something new in your spirit first. I'll tell you what helped me. I started reading the Word, not to be religious, but to renew my mind. I started speaking life over myself, even when I didn't believe it yet. I started obeying little things, fixing my habits, honoring my time, learning discipline. And most of all, I started believing that my spirit was made to be fruitful. Not because I deserved it, but because God designed it that way. Genesis says, "Be fruitful and multiply." That's not just a physical instruction. That's a spiritual identity you were created to produce, to multiply, to expand, to create, to build. But if your spirit doesn't believe that, your life never will. So no, you're not poor because you're unlucky. You're not poor because God forgot you. If you're poor, it's likely because somewhere inside you, your spirit has been crushed, broken, silenced, or distracted. And the good news? It can be healed. Your spirit can be rebuilt. Your inner man can be restored. You can rise again, not just financially, but spiritually. Because when your spirit gets strong, your life starts catching up. Everything you build outside is just a reflection of what's been built inside. So before you chase another opportunity, before you try another business, before you copy another strategy, ask this: is my spirit strong enough to carry the wealth I'm asking for? Because if it's not, you won't keep it. But if it is, you won't just attract wealth, you'll create it. From a place of wholeness, from a place of peace, from a place of truth. Because wealth isn't money first. Wealth is spirit first. And when the spirit is full, the hands can't help but overflow. You know what confirmed this to me even more? It was when I started reading the lives of people in the Bible. Real men. Imperfect. But rich in spirit long before they became rich in possessions. And when I say rich, I don't just mean money. I mean power, favor, legacy, and peace. Let's talk about Abraham. Before he became the father of many nations, before the livestock and the land and the legacy, Abraham had nothing except this: obedience to a word God gave him. He was asked to leave everything familiar. No map, no guarantee, no business plan. And he obeyed. That's spirit wealth. Because you can't obey a word like that unless your spirit is rich in trust. You don't leave your home country, your family, your comfort, just because you feel like it. Abraham left because something in him was aligned with the invisible. He was living by a spiritual truth, not physical comfort. And the result? Not only did he become materially blessed, but through him, the whole world would be blessed. Because wealth doesn't start with a bank account. It starts with being able to trust something bigger than yourself. Now let's talk about Joseph. We all know him for becoming second in command in Egypt. But let's rewind. Joseph was betrayed, sold by his own brothers, falsely accused, thrown in prison. If you only looked at the surface, you'd say he was cursed. But Joseph's spirit was never broken. And that's the part I admire the most. Even in prison, he served. He interpreted dreams. He stayed excellent. He stayed connected to God. He didn't let bitterness own him. He didn't let injustice destroy his heart. And because of that, because he kept his spirit strong, God elevated him in the exact place where others tried to bury him. That's spirit wealth. When you're rich enough inside that no one can bankrupt your purpose. Joseph didn't just get out of prison. He came out with wisdom, strategy, and favor, and became the reason Egypt and Israel survived a famine. Now let's go to Job. Job had everything: wealth, family, respect. And then in one season, everything collapsed. His kids died. His wealth disappeared. His health failed. Even his wife told him to curse God and die. If there's anyone who could have given up, it was Job. But the Bible says Job didn't sin with his lips. He wept. He didn't understand. But his spirit stayed submitted. That's real wealth. Because the ultimate test isn't how well you live in abundance, it's how you stand in loss. And Job stood. He didn't fake strength, he didn't perform, he just refused to let pain erase his faith. And because of that, God restored him. Not just equally, but double. But here's the deeper lesson. God didn't restore him because he begged. God restored him because he endured. He passed the spiritual test. And that spiritual strength is what carried him to double the material blessing. So look at these stories. Abraham's wealth came after obedience, Joseph's rise came after injustice, Job's restoration came after devastation. What do they all have in common? Their spirit didn't collapse, even when their world did. They had something most people never develop: spiritual wealth. They trusted when it didn't make sense. They obeyed when it wasn't popular. They endured when it felt unfair. They stayed when they wanted to run. And because of that, God trusted them with more. You see, we want the money of Abraham, the influence of Joseph, the restoration of Job, but are we building the kind of spirit that can hold it? If God gave you what you're asking for right now, would your character survive it? If he opened the door, would your discipline walk through it? If he gave you the money, would your heart handle the pressure? Because the truth is, what breaks people isn't failure. It's success that their spirit wasn't prepared for. Abraham waited years. Joseph was forgotten in prison. Job sat in ashes. They were not successful overnight, but they didn't break inside. They got stronger. That's why they were able to carry the blessing with peace, not pride. That's why their names are still spoken generations later. Because true wealth starts in the spirit. Before it shows up in your life, it must show up in your inner world. Let me be honest, most people don't want that process. They want the breakthrough without obedience. They want the favor without the testing. They want the overflow without the structure. But it doesn't work that way. God is not interested in giving you something that will destroy you. He is interested in growing you to become the person who can carry what he's already prepared. Remember Hebrews 11:3. Things that are seen were not made of things which are visible. So what makes your future? Not your job. Not your social media following, not even your bank account. Your future is shaped by the spiritual decisions you're making now. Who are you becoming when no one sees? How do you respond when things go wrong? Do you run or do you rest in him? That's where real wealth begins. Not in more effort, but in deeper alignment. Just like Abraham, Joseph, and Job. They didn't just walk in favor. They walked in faithfulness. And because of that, heaven trusted them with more. You want to change your life? Stop asking for things. Start strengthening your spirit. Because the day your inner man gets strong, that's the day your outer world starts catching up. So maybe now you're starting to see it. That what's really keeping most people broke isn't just the economy. It's not just the government. It's not even a lack of talent or effort. It's the weakness in the spirit. Because when your spirit is broken, your choices shrink. Your hope fades. Your actions get smaller. And your vision, it disappears. But when your spirit is strong, you see differently. You think differently. You move differently. That's what changed my life. Not a business course. Not a perfect product. Not some viral opportunity. It was the day I took spiritual discipline seriously. When I stopped treating prayer like a last resort. When I stopped blaming people or waiting for luck. When I stopped searching for shortcuts and started asking God to build me up from the inside out. That's when things began to shift. Because now I wasn't just chasing money. I was becoming someone that money could not control. And listen, there's something powerful that happens when you start doing the inner work. You become more calm in chaos. More certain in confusion. More focused when the world is distracted. You begin to obey quickly. You begin to give freely. You begin to move without begging for signs. Why? Because you're not building from the outside anymore. You're building from the spirit. And when your spirit leads, your mind follows. When your mind follows, your actions align. And when your actions align, that's when wealth starts to grow. Not just the kind of wealth that sits in a bank, but the kind that lasts even in storms. The kind that creates impact. The kind that multiplies peace, not just pesos. So if you feel like you're stuck, I want to tell you the truth. You don't need more hype. You don't need more hustle. You need healing in your inner world. You need to rebuild trust with God, rebuild focus in your soul, rebuild discipline in your habits. Because when your spirit is strong, even in the middle of a poor third world country, you are no longer poor. Your environment may not change immediately, but you are changed. And when you are changed, you start unlocking things you never thought were possible. Ideas begin to flow, peace begins to grow, doors start to open that weren't even in your plan. Why? Because you're finally aligned. You're no longer begging, you're building. You're no longer chasing vibes, you're obeying truth. You're no longer reacting to life, you're responding in faith. That is what makes spiritual discipline more powerful than manifestation. Because it's not based on your emotions, it's based on eternal principles that don't change. Truth doesn't shift, God's laws don't adapt to your mood, and favor doesn't come to the loudest, it comes to the most aligned. So stop waiting for the perfect timing. Stop scrolling, consuming, comparing, wondering. Go inward, because everything you want to manifest outwardly first has to be birthed inwardly. Start with your spirit. Feed it. Train it. Listen to it. And then obey. Because wealth is not a result. Wealth is a reward for those who steward the unseen well. If your spirit is broken, your life will reflect it. But if your spirit is whole, your life will start to rebuild, step by step, one aligned choice at a time. That's how I did it. And I'm not done yet, but I know now I don't need to manifest what's already mine. I just need to become the kind of person who's ready to carry it.